Hi, this is Michael Deloach, Deputy Commissioner of Public Affairs at DEP. Thank you. First and foremost, if everybody could mute their phones, we have a lot of people on the call, so if you could mute, that would be helpful. Thank you to everyone who's joining us this afternoon to hear the presentation and to those providing testimony, whether verbally or in writing. This is a public hearing of the New York City Water Board on the topics of water rates and billing policies for the upcoming fiscal year 2022, which begins July 1, 2021. As we did last year, we're holding the board's events in a virtual conference call format to facilitate communication in light of the pandemic. We would ask that everyone, again, just place your phone on mute in order to limit the background noise. I've placed several documents in the official record, including a notice appointing me as the hearing officer, verified copies of the public notices placed in the newspapers, a draft of the rate schedule, a draft of the rate schedule listing the rates and billing policies for the coming year, a public information booklet describing the proposed rates, and copies of the written testimony received by the board to date. The draft rate schedule and the public information booklet are available on the board's website, as is a copy of the presentation you'll be hearing today. This meeting is being recorded, and once prepared, an audio recording and a transcript of the meeting will be made available on the board's website at nyc.gov/nycwaterboard. For members of the public who have difficulty hearing, there's a real-time text captioning feature available to follow along with the meeting. You need to copy and paste the URL linking to the streamtext.net website. You can find that URL, which is pretty long, by visiting the Waterboard homepage and clicking the Meeting Materials link. It's under the Announcements section on the Waterboard homepage. You'll also find the URL provided on the public announcement posted on the board's website. The agenda for today's meeting includes two sections. First, the Department of Environmental Protection will make a presentation explaining proposed water rates for the fiscal year, again beginning July 1st, 2021, as well as billing policy modifications. Then members of the public will have an opportunity to make their statement. I have a list of pre-registered speakers, and when we get to that section of the hearing, I'm going to start by calling the pre-registered names in order. When you hear your name, please unmute your phone, and you'll have up to 5 minutes to speak. After I've called all the pre-registered speakers, I'm going to ask if anyone else would like to speak, and I'll try to mediate between people speaking at the same time as fairly as I can. If you would still like to register to speak today before I open it up later in the call, you can also email the Waterboard at nyc.waterboard@dep.nyc.gov. Again, it's nycwaterboard@dep.nyc.gov, and we have someone monitoring the email account to add your name to today's list. We have several members of the Waterboard with us today. I think I've heard 5 so far, as well as from the Department of Environmental Protection. We have our Chief Financial Officer, Joe Murin, and the board's treasurer, Omar Nazem. Finally, I'd like to add that if you're currently experiencing any issues with a bill pertaining to your water bill, you can always reach our customer service at 718-595-7000 or by emailing the board at nycwaterboard@dep.nyc.gov, and we'll route your inquiry. Before we get started, Chair Carney or members of the board, would anybody like to make any public statements?
Thank you, Mr. Deloach. It's Carney. And thank you for your willingness to guide us through this process. Very grateful for that. Looking forward to this meeting. When I'm finished, I will ask whether there are other members who would like to make comments. This is a process that is very meaningful for the members of this board. We, of course, receive a recommendation for the rate from DEP. This is the first instance in which we will have an opportunity to hear from the public with regard to that rate. I want to make it clear and on the record that this board has not made any determination yet as to what the rate is going to be. And we can be influenced by the comments that will be made during the meeting by members of the public. Thank you. There are several people who have agreed to speak. I am anxious to hear your comments. Look forward to this meeting. It's great to have so many people on. I gathered that we've got 35 or 40 people, which means that it is a much larger meeting virtually than was the case when we were meeting in face-to-face in a room. I hope that when we go back to the regular meeting format, that the numbers will stay as high as they are now. With that, I'll ask whether there are any members that would like to comment. There being no comments, Mr. DeLoach, I give you back the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Now we're going to hear a presentation from Joe Murin, the Chief Financial Officer at DEP.
Thank you, Michael DeLoach. Thank you, Chair Carney, and board members that are here that are on the call, as well as to the public that's also on the call. I'm going to be referring to the presentation that, as Omar noted, is on the board's website. We're going to start on slide number 2, which is the agenda for today. We're going to go through an update on Department of Environmental Protection operations and capital projects. Then we're going to have a financial and capital market update. We'll go through the proposal on water and wastewater rates to be effective July 1st, 2021 for customers in New York City. Then we'll go through the proposed rate schedule policy updates. And finally, we'll have the preliminary FY22 budget outlook. I'm now going to slide 3, which is an update on DEP's operations in the last year. Water and wastewater services were maintained throughout the pandemic without interruption or impact to water quality. DEP is following CDC guidelines around workplace safety protocols. DEP personnel are able to work in a remote digital format where assigned to remote work, and other personnel implemented social distancing, on-site temperature checking, and use of PPE at the work site. After reaching a peak of 80% of office employees in remote work format, the DEP workforce began returning to work site in the week of May 3rd. On a typical day at current rates, 70% of DEP personnel are on site. Some pandemic measures remain in place, including a moratorium on water shutoffs and digital work permitting, as well as a pause on certain filing deadlines, such as billing appeals. I'm now going to go to slide 4. Work that was completed and begun on important projects. In July, drainage improvements completed along Shore Boulevard in Astoria Park, Queens. This is a summarization of the significant capital projects we conducted during the fiscal year. In September, work commenced on 7 miles of new water mains at Gravesend and Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, for $30 million. In October, completion of Pugsley Creek's cleanup in the Bronx at a cost of $106 million. November, work commenced on Morrison Avenue Plaza transformation in the Bronx for $9 million. In November, flood mitigating green infrastructure constructed in Queens Village, Wayanda, and Cambria Heights, Southeast Queens, in addition to 3,000 other green infrastructure assets and $222 million in fiscal year 21 capital commitments. December, drainage upgrades for Bay Terrace, Staten Island for $10 million. January, new drinking water connections between Randall's and Ward's Island, Manhattan, completed for $31 million. And in February, Delaware Aqueduct Bypass Tunnel final liner installation in Newburgh, Orange County, a $1 billion total project cost. Now turning to slide 5, which is an update on board operations, revenue, and trends, which Omar Nazem will handle.
Good morning, everyone. The main point we'd like to communicate on slide 5 is that revenues year to date through the end of May, so essentially the first 11 months of the 12-month fiscal year, so a reliable outlook, we think, of where the year will close, are lower than last year, fiscal 2020. They are $194 million lower through the end of May, which is about 5.6% lower than last year. This is not unexpected to us. We knew that because of the pandemic and because of some of the financial trends we saw in fiscal year 2020, that revenues would be lower due to the combination of higher delinquencies and lower water use. And we adopted a budget, the board, I should say, adopted a budget for fiscal year 2021 that took that into account. The decline in revenues we've seen so far is less than the admittedly conservative budget we adopted last year, which is a positive thing. However, I think we would like to emphasize that there is nonetheless considerable financial uncertainty and less of a sort of cushion of safety, I would say, than in the past. The board and the revenues continue to be strong and robust, and the delinquencies in water usage remain within manageable bounds in terms of the variance to last year. We are certainly watching revenues more closely in the past, given the decline. On the specific topic of delinquencies, these are, I think the term is self-explanatory, but these are simply customers who don't pay their water bills on time. If you look at the amount of overdue water bills at the 180-day mark, which is longer than technical delinquency, which is 30 days, but given the environment, we're looking a little bit past the simple technical definition to 180 days. If you look at where we were at the end of April, we were up about 27% compared to last year, which is a large change percentage-wise, and included almost 16,000 additional newly delinquent accounts compared to the year before. I'm going to go on to slide number 6 the next page for anyone following along on the internet. This slide is really about changes in water use, and it's an important variable we look at because most of our customers are billed on a metered basis, so their bill is essentially the amount of water they use multiplied by a rate. So if you use less water, it means less revenue comes in. What we've seen is quite a wide variation in terms of which customer segments are using more or less water than in the past. It matches closely your intuition about what would have happened, which is smaller residential properties have higher use compared to last year. The commercial sector has substantially lower use, almost 20% lower than last year. And the larger residential buildings have somewhat lower use than last year. If you add it all together, total water use is negative 4.7%, almost 5% lower than last year. And that is a revenue headwind because the less water that's used, the less revenue there is for the system. I'm going to flip on to slide number 7 now. This is about bond financing, and the one sentence description of that is we use tax-exempt bonds, which we sell to investors to raise cash to pay for our construction projects or pay for most of our construction projects. So interest rates and bond market conditions are something we pay close attention to because changes in those markets and those conditions affect our costs in ways completely unrelated to our operations. It's just financial market variations. The key point here is a couple of things. One, we have a substantial amount of debt outstanding. It's about $30 billion of net debt. It's a large number to hear. It's a very manageable number if you think about it as financial institutions do, whether you look at it relative to our revenues or relative to our assets. But it is, in absolute terms, a substantial number. If you look at what happened in the tax-exempt market last spring, as the pandemic was beginning to accelerate, interest rate costs, borrowing costs for the kinds of bonds we sell increased by a lot in a very, very short period of time. That market dislocation subsided last year, and interest rates are back to normal ranges. So we're able to borrow at normal rates now. Our credit ratings remain strong. The credit rating outlook remains strong. And those are all positive things in terms of rates. Joe?
So turning to slide 8, thank you, Omar, for that. I'm now going to go through system 10-year capital investment plan. And as Omar said, the rates that the system raises support the operations as well as the bonds that finance the capital program. And the capital program for the fiscal years 2022 through 2031 totaled $20.4 billion. And the chart there demonstrates the breakdown between the various components of where those investments are made, with the bulk of it being in wastewater treatment and management at $7.48 billion. This is, the significant amount of investment we continue to make in the systems, wastewater treatment plants and pumping stations, and other, efforts to make sure that clean water is the water that we treat is as clean as possible. The other next largest component piece are the two areas of sewer replacement extensions, $5 billion, which covers naturally the sewers that then feed to the wastewater treatment plants, and then water distribution just under $5 billion, which is the upstate resources, assets that we need in order to collect, the water that feeds our reservoirs and then is, transmitted via the various aqueducts and tunnels to the in-city and upstate users. Next, which also encompasses as well the water supply and transmission of $2.3 billion. And finally, there's a small component for equipment, which is basically such as, IT facilities and, vehicles. Moving on to slide 9, this is the rate proposal to be effective for July 1st, 2021, which is now before the board for their consideration. We are proposing to the board a rate increase of 2.76%. That would be effective for fiscal year 22. That is July 1st, 2021. In addition to that rate increase, there is also enhancement to various customer affordability programs, which we'll get into further. And I will also want to point out that there will be no budgeted rental payment for fiscal year 22. The administration has indicated that they will not be requesting a rental payment at this time for fiscal year 22. So moving on to slide 10, what does a 2.76% rate increase translate into? It's typically a moderate, small increase to most of our, users. An average single-family charge, which is 70,000 gallons per year. The rate for fiscal year 2021 averaged $967. For fiscal year 2022, it is expected to be $994. So that's an increase of under $30 total for the year, just about $2.22 a month. For your average multifamily meter charge, that would be in a smaller building or a residential, a multifamily residential building, which is about 52,000 gallons per year. They're seeing less than $2 a month in their increase in their charge. I will point out that the minimum charge for properties using less than 90 gallons per day will be held steady, so no increase to those, which are mostly, seniors, as the most vulnerable population that are on the minimum charge. I'll turn it back to Omar for the next slide.
So this slide is about our customer affordability programs. This has been a big topic for several years now. Given we have had a number of modest rate increases, income inequality continues to be a big topic, and you have the challenge of how do you increase revenues to cover higher operating expenses at the same time you have a segment of customers whose incomes are not increasing or not increasing by the same amount. The answer is generally you have a customer affordability program. What you're doing under each of these programs is issuing a targeted bill credit that seeks to provide a benefit to one or another customer category. And it kind of offsets up part of their water bill so that the affordability challenge is lessened both on existing bills and also the effect of rate increases is a little bit buffered as well in terms of their ability to absorb those higher rates. We have 3 big programs here. I'll start with the smallest one first. The leak forgiveness program, which is not changing, we have it here just to note it, is a program where if a property experiences folks, can I ask you to keep your phones on mute, please, if possible? Thank you.
This is Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer.
Thank you. The leak forgiveness program is a program where if your property has a water leak, you fix it. We see evidence of the fix by looking at metered water use. You get half off the cost of the leak. It's a good program, a successful program. We're going to keep it. There's no upper bound on actually how many credits will issue each year, but the budgeted amount of the program terms are not changing. But it's a good program. We just want to mention it to make sure folks know about it. The second program I'll highlight is the multifamily water assistance program. And the idea of this program is to issue a bill credit, $250 per credit per apartment unit that's eligible, or apartment units in properties that are affordable, meaning they're subject to an affordability agreement, and the rent looked at in terms of average rent of the building to area median income is within a range. That program is a successful program. The uptake is very good every year. We're increasing it this year. We're going to add $2 million to the budget, so it's going to go from a $10 million to a $12 million program. The second program we have on here that I want to talk about is the Home Water Assistance Program. This is another residentially focused program, but it's focused on smaller property owners, which is tax class 1s plus the smallest of the tax class 2s, so 1 to 4 units. There's actually quite a big change here in terms of what we're talking about. We're going to be expanding the eligibility rules to include, to almost double the number, or actually, almost double the number of eligible accounts. It's going to go from the current 51,000 to 96,000 total accounts, and that's change number 1. And then change number 2 is we're going to give everybody who's eligible a larger bill credit. The bill credit today is $115.89. It's going to go as proposed to $145 per bill credit. The aggregate effect of those two changes is to more than double the program's budget, which will take it to $16 million. If you add it all up, what we're doing is increasing the total affordability budget for the customer affordability programs by 50%, which is taking it from $20 million to $30 million. It's a very large one-year funding increase. It's a number of changes we've been looking at for a few years, and we thought it was a good time to do something we had always wanted to do, particularly against the backdrop of all the shocks and dislocations that we have seen during the pandemic. So some significant changes here, but I think very positive pro-customer ones. Joe, I'll give it back to you for slide 12.
Thank you, Omar. So I'm on slide 12, which is water rates remain affordable compared to peers. I'll highlight just a couple numbers on this. I think generally over the past years, New York City has, in its water and sewer charges, run below the national average. It's been anywhere from 4%, back in 2016, to the latest numbers which we have, which is 2021, we're minus, 20% below the national average. So New York City paying $967 on average versus the 30 largest cities of $1,216. I think that speaks to the board's and the administration's commitment to keeping the rates low, while also recognizing we do still need to make, changes to the rates to continue investments into, both the operations and the capital program. I'll turn it back to Omar to talk about the detailed policy updates that are in this latest rate schedule.
All right, so I'm on slide 13 now, if you're following along. I will go quickly through this slide. This relates to a technical detail of the multifamily conservation program. This is a flat rate billing program for affordable properties that get meters and install water efficient fixtures in enough of their units to qualify. We have a subset, it's a great program, we have a subset of customers in this program who have not yet submitted all the paperwork they need to demonstrate compliance with all the program terms. And we've had in the rate schedule the idea of a surcharge for failure to get the paperwork filed for a number of years. We are going to be deferring the surcharge until the end of fiscal 2022 as proposed. Just given, again, the backdrop of the pandemic, we don't think it's the right time to be increasing billed amounts, particularly on the affordable multifamily world, given the backdrop. So this is simply amending the forbearance deadline from the end of fiscal 21 to the end of fiscal 22, another one-year addition to the forbearance period. Slide 14. This is on the topic of what happens if you don't pay your water bill on time. And the answer is a few different things, but the immediate thing that happens is we start to charge a rate of interest, late interest, on the amount as in a way that's analogous to what you pay on any kind of borrowing from a bank. This is an issue that does not apply to customers who pay their bills on time. So this is kind of the world of delinquent payments we're describing here. The law on how we deal with this has been the same since 1985. The rule is you have to charge late interest, and you have to charge it on late water bills at the same rate you have to charge on late property tax bills in the city. So the law and the rate schedule don't give you the answer on the late interest rate. They tell you where to go, though. And the answer for that is, who sets that? It's the New York City Banking Commission in collaboration with the New York City Council. They set the late rates on property taxes. That's the point we look at. That's the late interest on water bills, too. Now, to complicate it, of course, as it must be complicated, we have a computer system limitation with our fairly our circa 1995 computer system, which is that we can't currently charge one late interest rate. So the actual administrative practice for a number of years has been to charge an interest rate that is lower than required on the most valuable properties. Most properties are not affected by this. If you're in the lower valuation tier, if you're in a higher valuation tier, you are in effect being undercharged late interest. What we're doing in the rate schedule here is simply eliminating the current provision, which describes the administrative practice, which is based on the old computer system, and we're simply stating the legal requirement as it has always been, which is you got to charge late interest. It's the same rate as you charge on the overdue property tax bills in the city, and comes from the council and the banking commission. So we're simply stating factually what the requirement is, and we're taking out the old actual administrative practice requirement based on the old computer system. We're doing this because we have a brand new computer system coming on this year. So we have a new Microsoft Dynamics computer billing system, which we're starting up before the end of 2021, and that has the ability to deal with interest rates in a more dynamic fashion. Now, I will add, the current construct is two different interest rates, one for higher and one for lower valued properties. The banking commission, the city's banking commission, has already made a recommendation for what it thinks interest rate should be for the coming fiscal year. That has to be considered and acted upon by the council, which may do what they recommend or may do something different. And the new construct is there are 3 tiers of interest rates, which would be a new twist and very different how we've done this for really for decades now. Don't know if they'll pass it. They've had the idea of 3 interest rate tiers before. It is an interesting approach. It essentially creates a middle tier in between the higher and lower tier, which is an interesting take. If they do that, we will follow the guidance as we're able to based on the computer system and its abilities. But the summary of what we're doing in the rate schedule is simply we're taking out the existing language and we're simply repeating the legal requirement as written in state law. Now, slides 15 and 16, I'm going to kind of treat as a pair. And these are because they're very similar in terms of what we're trying to do. And I'll say up front, we've received a lot of very, very constructive, detailed feedback, both policy and technical, from a number of different folks. I believe we have people registered to testify on both of these today. And I think the board has already received copies of much of that testimony, and I know we'll take it seriously, and we'll certainly inform everyone's discussion about this. What we're trying to do with both slides 15 and 16 is the rate schedule is offering an economic incentive to property owners who install environmentally friendly infrastructure. One is you install an asset that reuses water. One is you install an asset that treats wastewater on site. The things we're trying to do here, the commonality across both of them is, one, we're trying to expand the billing concept we have now, which is around the single property, as the thing that requests the billing discount, to retain that, but also allow a group of properties, say as part of a larger development that has a single or a number of these recycling assets on site that share them. And the contributions and withdrawals from the systems may not be exactly proportional to to each of the variables for the different buildings, but we nonetheless want to, if a good kind of pro-environmental improvement goes in, make the property owners able to come and apply, make the case based on what a collection of properties are doing is distinct from just a single property. And that's an amendment we're proposing for both the CWR and the private wastewater treatment plants. A group of properties can come and request them, not just a property, as the rate schedule describes today. And that's really the main story on this comprehensive water reuse. The private wastewater treatment billing discount, we're doing something else with as well. A key question with this discount is always, well, if the wastewater is being treated on site, is there an allowable threshold of release into the city sewer system? And what should that number be? The discount today contemplates essentially no allowable sewage released into the local sewer system, which is a high threshold. The proposed rate schedule on the website contemplates a 10% allowable release. We've received, I can tell you already, quite a bit of testimony describing the various reasons, both policy and engineering driven, why you might want to look at a higher number. And we've provided the board with all that testimony. I know some speakers will be speaking on that topic today. The thing I'll say about both of these, and one of the reasons we brought them back today is, although these are property improvements we want to encourage and we want to incentivize, between the two policies, I think we have fewer than 10 properties in the city enrolled in one or the other discount today. So it's been a fairly narrow uptake compared to our 840,000 properties that we have, and these are improvements that fundamentally we think are good and positive and pro-environmental and good for the system. So the real impetus behind all this was, can we make amendment to the policies to make them more attractive to property owners and the public? And that's really the goal of what we're trying to do. The collection of properties amendment and looking at the threshold of allowable releases both are informed by that request. So that's really what the impetus is here. And the board, again, will be considering all the extensive testimony that's been provided today. So, Joe, I'm going to give it back to you for slide 17.
Okay, thank you, Omar. So slide 17, the preliminary water board financial outlook. So this is a comparison of fiscal year 2021 estimated where the system will end up on June 30th of this year, and then showing what we estimate the budget needs will be for the system in fiscal year 22, starting on July 1st of this year. You'll see that overall it is fairly flat. $3.5 billion in each instance, with two of the biggest components being, as always, the Water Authority funds, which is for the capital program to do the financing through the bonds, and then the DEP operations and maintenance expense, which is got a slight increase as mainly due to the fact that there was some money that did roll over from fiscal year 20 into fiscal year 2021. Fiscal year 20 was just the beginning of, the end of fiscal year 20, which would have been the spring of calendar year 21 was the beginning of the pandemic, and we did see a significant slowdown in the way we were conducting business. So that did create a surplus that we were then able to use to offset some of the needs for fiscal year 2021. Those surpluses naturally went to help alleviate some of the needs of the system, helping us to deliver a 0% increase last year. Whereas for this year, we are seeing an increase in expenses when you net out that $94 million in surplus of about $45 million, which was for such things as Gowanus Canal remedial design. This is the in-canal remedy that we need to be working on with the accordance with the EPA record of decision. We also have funding of about $10 million for the Owl's Head treatment plant for the dock that needs to be repaired. There's about $8 million for increase in price of chlorine, $8 million for the new billing system that Omar just referenced that would be able to allow us to do these multiple interest rate charges. And there's also $6 million in funding for maintenance of the marine fleet and fire protection at the various wastewater treatment plants. Those are just a couple of the larger items as well. I will note that we be mindful that the 2.76% is not just covering for this year, but also going forward in making sure that we're going to be sufficiently, cash funding to cover the expected increases in other expenses as the system goes forward on the O&M side, as well as the increases to the capital program. And now we go to slide 18. So this is our first public hearing. We will be having another public hearing tomorrow, Wednesday, June 2nd at 6 p.m. Same format, virtual with the dial-in number. And then I will note that the budget and rate adoption meeting that is scheduled for the board to consider and decide what the path forward is set for Monday, June 14th at 9 a.m. That being said, that closes the presentation. I'll return the proceedings back over to the hearing officer, Michael DeLoach.
Great. Now we're going to hear from the public for those that have registered to testify. We're going to start with Jennifer Charrier from Brooklyn College. Are you on?
I had heard from Jennifer Charrier today that she had a medical issue and was not going to be able to attend today.
Understood. Thank you. Ed Clerico from the Natural Systems Utilities, are you on?
Thank you. Yes, this is Ed Clerico. I'm the CEO Emeritus of Natural Systems Utilities. I want to thank Chairman Carney and the board members for the opportunity to testify here today. So we've been involved in water reuse for 33 years, and 18 of those years, the past 18 of those years, in New York City, starting with the Battery Park City systems, and now, as Treasurer Nazem mentioned, we have 10 systems up and running in the city. All throughout this time, I have to really acknowledge the cooperation of the New York City DEP, the Department of Health, and the Department of Buildings, because as we started, there were many barriers and regulatory challenges to overcome before this program could really get legs and grow well. There were plumbing code issues, there were health code challenges that we had to address. And we've been very successful, and the program over time is now growing into bigger and better systems, less pollutant load on the wastewater systems and the environment, better resiliency and less demand on the potable water supply side. This has come about through a number of changes over the years, more reuse as laundry was added as a allowable indoor reuse in 2007, less energy consumption through thermal energy recovery systems now that have been implemented as of 2018, and overall improved economics thanks to the CWRP program that Treasurer Nazem just mentioned. And to wrap up in all of that, more resilient because these systems survived Superstorm Sandy without having any violations, and they've proven themselves to be very robust. So now, with the current changes that are proposed, we're poised for significant advancement under these proposed changes. The district scale ability to combine multiple buildings will help both on the practical aspects of deploying these systems and on their economics because they'll be slightly bigger. That, coupled with the capital grants program that the DEP is offering, really now make this an option that will have much more uptake in the market. However, there's three issues with these amendments that are going to stymie the future growth if left without modification. And they're not big issues, but I know they're important. So I just want to touch on each of those three briefly. The first one is, as currently written, there's this 10% maximum allowable discharge into the city sewer. And we're actually designing a system now of that nature. It's the first of these in the country. And we don't think there'll be many more of these in the near future because it really takes it to an extreme. However, if we look at all the other systems that we've been building over the years, they do a wonderful job of recycling and reuse. And in residential buildings, we can get 50% reuse. In institutional and commercial buildings, we can get 75%, sometimes a bit more. So with the technology, the state of the art the way it is, and the way the regulations are with regards to what you can use non-potable water for, 75% is about the most we can really shoot for on an ongoing average basis. So we request that 10% max be increased to 25% max. This way, the uptake of this benefit will be much more broadly applied across various development projects in the city. That's the first point. The second point is there's a requirement is written now that we monitor sewage at each point of discharge. We understand the request, but we also want to put forward that there's a better way of approaching this with water metering, which has already been approved through the CWRP program at DEP, because water meters are much simpler to operate and to deploy and to automate, and you can create a very accurate water balance within a system by just using water meters. Sewage meters typically work in a gravity flow situation in sewage treatment plants where they can be exposed to the atmosphere and in areas where that's safe and appropriate to do. That's really difficult to do inside buildings, and so that would be a fairly significant hurdle that we hope can be eliminated because we don't feel it's necessary for achieving the objectives intended. The third one is the limitation on the capital grants. As written right now, it indicates that they would be limited to 50%. And we're very happy to have the grants. We think they help a lot. We just ask that you give DEP the ability to use their discretion and set the grants based on the benefits or the merits of each project. There could be projects in certain areas, maybe where the low-income economics might play in with affordability of building and housing units, or potentially in areas where the environmental constraints are very severe and the benefit gained by a system is more that the city wants to capitalize to a higher degree. So we just request those three items that you give serious consideration to some edits. Then we'd have a really wonderful program that would be remarkable across the whole country. So it's the raising the 10% max discharge to city sewers to 25%, monitoring the discharge with water meters instead of sewer meters, and giving DEP discretionary ability with regards to the grant program. And those are my comments. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Ed. Jason Loisel from Sherwood Design Engineers. Are you on?
I am. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. My name is Jason Loisel from Sherwood Design Engineers. I'm the principal leading our office in New York City. I've been here in New York City for about 15, going on 16 years now. Our office is based in San Francisco. We're civil engineers, but we're founded on a focus on water resources. And specifically today, we're talking about the potential for water conservation and water reuse in New York City. And so as private consultants, we are frequently engaged by architects and developers to evaluate the feasibility in New York City, as well as across the country, for establishing more comprehensive measures for reducing water use, reducing combined sewer discharges, and promoting natural systems-based water reuse as well. So speaking again, pretty much the same topics that Ed just laid out, what we see is that New York City is incredibly progressive with incentivizing this. I'm based in San Francisco, our office being comparing the two cities. New York City has taken a different tack with incentivizing rather than mandating to achieve these levels, and it's laudable, and I think it has the potential to be much more impactful by doing it this way rather than mandating. But the challenge that we see is with the financial viability, and essentially right now with the comprehensive water reuse program and the pilot grant programs that are in place, it kind of drives developers to go to the minimum, which is a 25% reduction over a baseline, which can largely be achieved in most cases with just conservation rather than with reuse. And then at the other end of the spectrum, given the code the way it's written right now, it has to go to 100% redirection of wastewater away from the combined sewer system. And so it's really that gap in the middle that is a huge missed opportunity to incentivize a wide array of additional developers to do this. And having been making this pitch and doing these feasibility assessments for many years now, for from the largest scale developments like Hudson Yards to the smallest scale, it's really that middle ground where the real opportunity is yet to be unlocked. And so, not to reiterate exactly what Ed just said, but given the way that the code is written, and in advance of making the progress that our industry needs to make to incentivize more essentially direct potable reuse, treating water to potable standards, the allowance for that wastewater treatment and reuse makes it pretty much preclusive to achieve a 90% redirection of wastewater away from the combined sewer system. And so we're just advocating today for something a bit more feasible. It's just not possible except in very unique cases that you would be able to redirect 90% away, unless you were able to discharge to a water course. And most development is landlocked, with the only option being discharged to the combined sewer system. So essentially just reiterating the same request today, whether it be reduced to 25% or something more. With each percentage that you reduce it above or increase it above a 10% redirection is going to incentivize that many more new developers. And it's really going to help. You know, we're doing a lot of work in Gowanus right now, advising several developers on how they can manage these challenges in, you know, a really difficult place like Gowanus, especially in light of the new rezoning, you know, or pending rezoning. They really will be incentivized to consider something like wastewater reuse, whereas given the way it's currently written, it's not quite there yet. You know, a lot of it goes to the fact that there's, you know, the best intent behind most of these developers and their desire to do what is sustainable and best for our natural resources and the public health in general. But, you know, perception gets in the way a lot of times with the desire to manage wastewater. And so the financial side of it needs to push a little bit harder to get them over that boundary. And so this modification to the current recommendation would go a long way to getting there. So thank you for the time and look forward to your consideration.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Michael Bogan from Stive Paget Riesel Law Firm.
Yes, thank you. It's Michael Bogan from Stive Paget Riesel. I'm a shareholder there. Thank you, Chair Carney and board members, for giving me the opportunity to address you today. I've submitted written comments and actually a proposed red line of the rate schedule Part 3, Section 6, and I hope you will accept that. I don't want to repeat what's already been said by Ed Clerico and others, but just again to focus on not disincentivizing the private creation of water reuse and private sewer systems that will take pressure off of the city system. My background, you know, I started with the New York City Law Department nearly 30 years ago before I went into a private practice, and was one of the first attorneys in the city's environmental law division. I helped draft the New York City watershed regulations. So my focus for decades literally has been on looking at stormwater, looking at wastewater, and what systems can be incentivized to take pressure off of the city's infrastructure. And the city's done a terrific job in doing that. And I think we'll continue to do that with a few tweaks to this rate schedule that we've proposed here. Ed Clerico went through them again, but you know, setting the threshold at something, you know, setting the threshold at 0 is just not, or at 10%, you know, basically a 90% reduction into the system is not technically feasible from everything that I've heard. And so we would ask the board to look at increasing that threshold to 25%. I won't go again through the metering issues, which also we think is something that is easily addressed on a case-by-case basis by looking at the technical components of the particular system that's being addressed, and very importantly, not to penalize developers who are looking to take wastewater and out of the system and to reduce the amount of water use from the system, not to disincentivize them or to penalize them by having essentially having the DEP grant program be superseded in the event that that a private developer accepts the DEP grant and then is unable to take the benefit of the reduction in the rate schedule. Those are really the three key components that we hope the board will address. And again, in the written comments there, I've provided a proposed red line that I believe would address those issues. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Michael. Holly Porter Morgan from the Swim Coalition. Are you on?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead,
All right.
Holly.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Carney and board members. On behalf of the Stormwater Infrastructure Matters Swim Coalition Steering Committee and our member organizations around New York City, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to comment on the proposed water and wastewater changes. In terms of the rate increase, given the continued hardships posed to so many New Yorkers by the pandemic, we note that the rate increase at this time could impose a significant burden on low and moderate income New Yorkers. We believe it's prudent to exclude low and moderate income New Yorkers from this rate increase until the city's unemployment rate returns to a pre-pandemic level. In terms of the CWR, we enthusiastically support water reuse and on-site water recycling systems that reduce the demand on both water supply system and wastewater treatment system. However, we urge you to carefully consider the potential constraints that have been brought up here that would discourage the private sector investments in on-site water recycling systems, including the maximum allowable discharge of 10% of treated flow into the city's wastewater system, the requirement to install a flow meter at every point of discharge, and the ineligibility of funds projects funded with more than 50% of city funding. These would create barriers to private developers. In terms of the rental payment is a relic of an outdated agreement made more than 3 decades ago, and revenues from ratepayers should stay with the DEP. We recommend that the Water Board take necessary steps to permanently eliminate the rental payment. Until the lease agreement is officially amended to eliminate this requirement, the DEP is at risk of losing hundreds of millions of dollars each year to an outdated agreement. Fourth point is the equitable rate restructuring. The Swim Coalition and our members call for the adjustment of New York City rate structure to equitably incentivize responsible stormwater management. The current rate structure fails to create incentives for sustainable stormwater management, and New York City can really do better. The city's current rate structure is blind to how much stormwater pollution a property generates. And instead, what it does is it lumps wastewater and stormwater into one charge based on how much potable water is used. This is an inequitable system where properties with large impervious areas, but only a few bathrooms, such as a big box retail commercial site with a large parking lot, but only a few bathrooms, pays far less than the true cost of managing their runoff into the public sewer system, while a more compact residential property with higher water use relative to their impervious footprint pays much more than their fair share of managing DEP's stormwater management costs. Okay, DEP needs to modernize its rate structure to use best practices and ensure that the cost of addressing stormwater runoff from this densely developed, highly impervious surface areas are spread equitably among ratepayers. In regards to stormwater, it's crucial that the city do this so that those who generate stormwater pollution pay for their fair share of associated costs. We see this as this restructuring would include the ability to tie stormwater customer revenues directly to the cost associated with stormwater management, and that would give us a dedicated revenue source. This would include an equitable association of those costs among ratepayers and an incentive for private sector to invest in green infrastructure as well. Finally, we recognize that the DEP has a study underway that will explore potential rate reform, and we're encouraged by the formation of the Sustainable Rate Structure Analysis Advisory Group. And we look forward to attending the first meeting this month. We also asked the Water Board to provide public oversight of the study and to direct or actively collaborate with the DEP to ensure that it provides a public report to the board on an ongoing basis throughout the study. We appreciate the interest that the Water Board members, including the chair, have shown to this topic at rate hearings in the recent years, and we encourage the Water Board to act now to hold the DEP accountable for making quick progress on this issue. Now is the time to restructure New York City's water rates to ensure that we can meet these needs in an equitable manner and reduce overall costs for the city. We thank you for the opportunity for the Swim Coalition to provide our testimony, and have a great day.
Great. Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
Bonnie Campbell from Two Trees Management. Are you on?
I am on. Thank you.
Hey, Bonnie, go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Bonnie Campbell. I'm speaking on behalf of Two Trees Management, a Brooklyn-based real estate development company. I think I'm speaking as the voice of the developer that's trying hard to be incentivized, as some of the previous testimony has referenced. In recent years, our company has prioritized a number of corporate sustainability goals in an effort to kind of establish our firm as leaders for responsible real estate development in New York. In accordance with these goals, we've been working with the DEP and a team of engineers to design a district-scale non-potable water reuse facility at our site at the 11-acre Domino campus in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. This development, once it's fully constructed, will have over 3 million square feet of space, including over 500,000 square feet of office space and 2,500 residential apartments. As currently planned, the water reuse facility that we're proposing has the capacity to treat, reuse, and discharge into the East River over 400,000 gallons of clean water per day, reducing wastewater discharges into the municipal sewer project-wide by more than 75%. Among its many benefits, we're hoping that this unprecedented project can demonstrate the private sector's role in reducing the strain on New York City's potable water and wastewater systems, while also reducing the impact of combined sewer overflows and pollutant loads emitted to the East River. When we initially set out to pursue this system, it was a much more modest reuse-only system. But thanks to the availability of DEP grant funding and the proposed amendments to Section 6 rate schedule, we're incentivized to pursue something much more ambitious and frankly, much more impactful, we hope. And while the payback for our upfront investment for this larger system is extremely long, even with both sets of incentives, we think that demonstrating to our developer peers, frankly, that we can collectively reduce our reliance on city infrastructure and reduce our impact on the water resources is a worthwhile investment in and of itself. We applaud the city and DEP for the forward thinking about water conservation and reuse. However, as some of the previous testimony has indicated, the language as it's currently proposed in the Section 6 amendments leads us to a place where we cannot commit to pursuing the system I just described at Domino, for example, without some changes to the proposed text. I'll submit my written testimony that more specifically describes these changes, and they're not really different than what you've heard in previous testimony. But I'll describe them kind of generally now. The first one, the 10% maximum discharge currently proposed is not technically feasible, nor does it allow for enough tolerance in the design to make this magnitude of upfront investment without being able to predict with confidence that the system will qualify for this essential incentive. This is a big thing that maybe some of the previous testimony didn't say, but from a developer's perspective, we really need to, if we're laying out all of the capital up front when we invest in a system like this, we really need to be confident that 5, 10, 15 years down the road, we'll be eligible for the incentives that are in place. Otherwise, it makes no sense to make the investment up front. And when you have a very narrow, maximum discharge like the 10%, and you're relying on engineering calculations that, make assumptions about water usage and appliances and all of that kind of thing, it's very, very scary, to not know that there's some sort of buffer there that will ensure that we qualify for this portion of the incentive. The second, as my previous testimony has stated, the endpoint sewage metering requirement is not technically feasible. And again, it adds worry from our perspective that it's highly inaccurate, and it adds an additional cost to an already kind of complex system of pumps and pipes and machines. And we know that there's much more accurate and efficient ways to meter wastewater treatment in private facilities, as currently exists in the CWRP, as Ed mentioned from NSU in previous testimony. And we recommend that these be included in the application procedure for the rate schedule, rather than the rate part that these. Let me just say this properly. There are much more accurate and efficient ways to meter wastewater treatment in private facilities, and we recommend that, subject to DEP approval, the applicant include an engineer's report with a monitoring procedure as part of the rate application, instead of establishing the specific metering procedure in the rate schedule itself. And then finally, the provision that ties the eligibility requirement to the maximum city grant of 50%, of the cost of the system really does undermine the package of incentives that are needed to make this type of investment feasible from the developer's perspective. We wouldn't be able to pursue this type of system without both sets of incentives in place. The city's grant program is already discretionary, and we agree that DEP can determine how and where it best deploys its capital based on department priorities and city needs. Again, we praise the department and the water board for supporting water conservation and reuse, and we sincerely hope that you'll consider making these changes to the proposed text so that companies like ours will consider pursuing on-site reuse and treatment. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bonnie. And I know Joanna Kletter from the Catholic Homes New York, you had said you wanted to speak. You can go next.
Yes, thank you. I'm Johanna Kletter, acting CEO for Catholic Homes New York, an affordable housing provider under the Archdiocese of New York. Our portfolio consists of about 2,800 units of affordable, low-income, family supportive, and senior housing all throughout New York City. These are unusual times, especially for affordable housing and the residents that we serve. The pandemic has disproportionately affected renters, deepening their debt, and in turn, restricting our income collections on these projects. Our projects depend on rent collections to provide services and meet our financial obligations. Our projects have suffered a year of extraordinary economic hardship. As we watch them to continue to struggle to pay basic utility, insurance, and debt service bills, we oppose this proposed 2.76% water and sewer rate increase. Although we strongly support the moratorium on eviction, these actions restrict tenants from being able to receive emergency subsidy assistance, and therefore we've expanded our services to tenants by proactively reaching out to delinquent ratepayers and are helping them apply to any emergency rental assistance that is available. DEP reported they are seeing overdue bills, and I think 26.6% higher than last year with newly delinquent accounts. And I would recommend that DEP replicate our approach, working with our tenants and proactively reach out to delinquent account holders and water ratepayers to work with them to enter payment plans. Throughout the pandemic, DEP has decreased the interest rate on unpaid water bills, as was presented in the presentation. It's the same that the city has done for property taxes. It's understood that due to billing system limitations and an old antique system, DEP is charging the lower 5% interest rate. And I request that DEP keep the lower penalty rate in place on these delinquent accounts longer than New York City Council has allowed for property tax, and reassess the penalty rate next year as well. For the past 15 years, we followed this DEP rate proposal and all the increases. We've witnessed the rate charged for water and sewer service triple in cost. Each year, we rework all of our building budgets and apply to every incentive program that is offered to absorb the extreme water rate increases. We have spent additional money to sub-meter our retail spaces, to install the low-flow fixtures, to fill out all the applications prior to deadlines, to make sure we get our buildings into the affordable water programs. Every year we read the DEP report or Blue Book and don't feel enough attention is paid by DEP to cutting their costs and their overhead. Instead, the focus is usually on how the increase will be low compared to the previous increases, or, it's still the lowest per unit in the country. This year, I was actually happy to see some attention being paid to reworking the design, bid, build process into a design, build structure. But I see that DEP is still employing a staff full of engineers, and yet DEP still contracts out almost all of their design work. We asked DEP to hire a consultant instead to analyze internal operational costs and work to drastically cut their operational costs. I think, speaking of cutting costs, we would like to see the New York City rental payment eliminated from the DEP budget permanently and freeing up money in the budget for other items. I am happy to read about the proposed 50% increase to affordability programs, but sad to hear yet another year of the extension of the multifamily conservation program compliance requirement. This program has never been fully complied with since the discontinuation of frontage billing in 2012. A lot of frontage buildings were parked in the MCP program without being vetted without inspection, a full compliance measurement. It's not right to extend this program benefit to buildings not meeting the efficiency standards that other NCP compliant buildings are. We ask DEP to start checking compliance and issue penalties or convert those non-compliant NCP bills over to metered billing immediately. In my experience working with affordable housing, I have firsthand knowledge of how the increase on water costs disproportionately affects affordable housing. We have seen the NCP fixed rate from program inception in 2014 charge just $424 per unit and rise 255% to now a proposed $1,081 per unit per year. I've watched our building budgets get tighter and tighter while not having a clear breakdown of how collections are being spent at DEP. The rate structure study that DEP commissioned earlier this year will only be successful if it includes greater participation from our community-based organizations and housing providers. I'm going to echo SWIM's comments that we would appreciate and encourage the ability to participate in the Sustainable Rate Structure Analysis Working Group and really welcome the participation. In conclusion, I don't know how long I've gone. Sorry if I'm over my 5 minutes, but I ask that DEP and the Water Board consider extending the interest rate reduction even longer than the New York City Council for property taxes. I ask DEP hire a consultant to analyze internal operational costs and work to drastically cut their expenses. I ask permanently eliminate the rental payment from the DEP budget. Continue to expand multifamily water assistance program and the home water assistance program for low-income ratepayers. Require MCP compliance and issue penalties or convert those non-compliant to metered billing. And ask that DEP be open to increased participation in the rate structure analysis. And I guess in conclusion, I would like the New York City Water Board to vote for no increase on the water rate for fiscal year 2022. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening.
Great, thanks, Johanna. That's the list we have that have pre-registered or voiced wanting interest on the call. Is there anybody else that would like to testify during the call? So, Chair Carney, I think hearing no one, I think we have concluded our hearing today and welcome comments or anything you'd like to say in closing.
Mr. DeLoach, thank you very much. I actually, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of the people who testified today, Mr. Clerico, Mr. Loisette, Mr. Bogan, Ms. Porter Morgan, Ms. Campbell, and Ms. Kletter. A question for those who commented on the 10% maximum Section 6, in order to qualify for the wastewater discount, a private wastewater treatment plant may release at most 10% of the annual wastewater, and on and on and on. I gather, Mr. Bogan, you have submitted alternative language that's redlined. My question is 25% somehow, 10% is insufficient, and apparently that poses a technical problem. And you, Mr. Clerico, recommended 25%, and those who commented on the same issue seem to agree with you that 25% was the right number. How do you get there? Is 20% the right number? I don't know. It appears that those of you who commented on this issue have raised a question, and you've proposed a number. Where does that number come from?
So this is Ed Clerico. I'll do my best to respond to that. Thank you for the question. We have many water reuse systems around the country. As I said, we've been doing this for 33 years. The amount of water reuse you can do within a certain system depends on the use of the buildings and what uses are allowed for non-potable water. That's increased over time. As I said, we've added laundry to it, and we do cooling towers. It's a lot of good uses for non-potable water, but there are some that until the rules change that you can have potable reuse, it's really hard to get much higher than 75%. So 75% is a real stretch for most projects. If you have a mixed-use project, you might make 75%. If you have an institutional project where most of the water use in the building is non-potable water, you'll get to 75%. If you have residential uses, you're going to be down around 50%, just because of the uses in the home that have to remain potable under the current law, such as showering and dishwashing and things of that nature that make up a good part of the difference. So the 25% comes from mostly years of experience and operating systems that have various types of water reuses under different building uses. That's how we develop that number.
That helps me a great deal. It's about experience. It's about your experience with the technical impossibility of technical difficulties of going beyond 75% or beyond 25%. That's rational. Thank you. Makes sense to me.
You're welcome.
Are there members with questions? Adam, do you have any questions particularly?
I guess one question I have, because I heard a couple of examples in responses to the stormwater and wastewater metering issue. I believe the person who testified from Two Trees talked about having an engineer's report. Ed, you or the gentleman who testified, I think it was Jason from Sherwood Engineers, talked about simply having a water meter. I guess just a little bit more perspective anyone may have on either the technologies or the structures in place to ensure that we are getting some monitoring of stormwater in place as alternatives to the current rule.
Well, this is Ed Clerico again. If I understand the question, you're asking kind of two questions: the best way of monitoring and how do you monitor for stormwater. So water meters are robust and they're simple and they're highly automated. And it's easy to deploy a number of water meters in a project and have them all report to a controller and map out a water balance instantaneously and continuously. So you have a very good reading on a water balance. In a water reuse system, there's amount of water that comes in, there's an amount of water that goes out. It only goes out either through evaporation, through cooling towers or irrigation, or it goes out to the city sewer. So because you can put water meters on all of those, other than for the one going to the sewer, it's very easy to determine how much is going to the sewer by just using the water meters. So taking that same idea, some of our systems incorporate stormwater. And you could, because stormwater is cleaner, and because it sometimes is filtered before it even reaches into the building, it's relatively easy to monitor stormwater also through similar type of metering devices. So I think it's very practical to set up a robust metering program of water use, sewage discharge, and stormwater, if you want that separated, to know how the water in the project site behaves in total. Does that answer your question?
That does. Thank you very much, and I'd like to thank particularly the Swim Coalition comments on the sustainable water study, rate structure study going on, something that's been very close to my heart. So appreciate the continued focus on that from them and others.
You're welcome.
Are there other questions from the members? I want to thank all of the folk who testified today again. Ms. Clutter, I don't want you to think that your comments went unnoticed. It is often
thank you.
It is very often the case that we get recommendations to avoid a rate increase for all the right reasons, affordability, and particularly during this difficult time. I think every member of this board heard your comments and listened carefully. Thank you very much for offering them.
Thank you for allowing me to present. I appreciate it. And I'll submit in written form as well.
Terrific. Thank you. Mr. DeLoach, I had nothing further.
Great. Well, hearing no others interested in testifying, I believe this concludes today's public hearing. Thank you all for your input and to the board for your time. I hope everybody has a great day.
Thank everybody.